I always tell this story. My wife's not here, and if she's here, I don't tell it. But I want to talk about a date I had in my freshman year of college because it's a significant thing, and I didn't understand it at all. I've grown to understand it. My mother introduced me to a young gal who she said would just be perfect for me to know. And we had lots of things in common. We really did. And she's very lovely. And outside the fact that at 18 years old, like a normal young man, my hormones were pretty strong. Outside of some physical attraction for her, I just didn't like her. And there's no reason for it. It doesn't make any sense. There was every reason in the world for me to like her. But what I didn't understand then is that the girls that I was most attracted to, that most seemed inviting and with whom I wanted to build a relationship, were women who were like my mother, who seemed to create psychological dynamics similar to my mother in relationship to me. Again, not the exact things, but the same feelings tend to be created in those relationships. And so that's why that relationship didn't work out. And I went through a period of my life in really being interested in, not hookers and prostitutes, but women who were not good for me, who were not people to whom I seemed attracted to on a natural basis. You see, we select the partners we select for very strong psychological reasons that have to do with the subconscious. And it's very, very sad. I'll meet people who are married 3 or 4 times, and it's not necessarily that they're bad people or anything like that. They keep choosing a different model of the same problem. We do another lecture on this very specific thing about how our childhood affects our choice of partners. So I need to stop on that point. Now, let's say that you know somebody who has none of these 3 predictors. So you know a Jeff, and he had a lousy relationship. This is not true, but had a lousy relationship with my parents. I never saw a good marriage done in my life, and I especially hated my mother, kind of thing. Can that person be a good marital partner? Yes, if he or she has adequately worked through these problems. To be honest, we put ourselves together in one of 2 ways. Either through having a really good family or through a lot of hard work that often includes a lot of therapy and a lot of rethinking about who we are and what we need to be. If we have done nothing on this matter, we've done no reflection, we've not worked to change ourselves, then we are doomed probably to not have good relationships. Those 3 predictors are key. Let's also talk about relationships that tend not to work. Now, these are not flaws that are as obvious as addictions and anger and victim consciousness and control freaks. These are things that if you have this going on, this usually is a good indicator that it's probably not going to make it. First of all, where you care more about your partner than the other cares about you, it almost never changes. Your partner cares more about you than you do about him or her. That never changes. You are in love with your partner's potential. You're on some kind of rescue mission, and I've known many people like this. They try to help others, and they want to help another be his or her best self. What they don't realize, the other person's not interested in that, really. So rescue missions tend not to work. You look up to your partner because you respect them as a person, and they're a model of who you think human beings should be. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't fuel love. Respect in and of itself is not something that necessarily brings about all sorts of love. Does that make sense? And then the next is you're infatuated with the person for external reasons. Everybody likes Joe. Why can't I? Everybody feels good about her. She meets people so well. When I'm with her, I really like the way everything comes off. That doesn't necessarily work. Then there is partial compatibility. You get along in some ways, but you have major differences about which you're unable to settle. We get along just fine as long as we don't do X. And that's where we want to start in marital therapy, is right on X. We choose a partner in order to rebel against family or somebody else. I'm going to show her, I'm going to get married again. And I'll show her what a loving wife is all about. But now marriage number 2 also doesn't work. And the partner again is in some way unavailable, emotionally distant or otherwise. Now, a logical question that you may have in this part of my presentation, I'm going to stop a little early because I want to take your questions, and we'll hopefully, in a Dr. Laura kind of way, see if we can respond to them. Here's some qualities to look for. And just before I give you these, I get a reaction to this particular lecture every time. Somebody out there will say, "You've discouraged me about relationship because what you said makes them all look impossible." Not at all. I told you in the beginning, and I'm going to tell you again. Good relationships are tough. You're better off single and partially fulfilled than in relationship and partially fulfilled. Because there's 50% of that equation about which you can do nothing, as we indicated earlier. So here are some qualities that I would recommend that you need to look for in a good partner. These aren't as in-depth as that happy childhood and good relationship with parents, and also having a good model. This is more surface level. First of all, here are some qualities that I would recommend that you need to look for in a good partner. These aren't as in-depth as that happy childhood and good relationship with parents, and also having a good model. This is more surface level. First of all, you believe that the other is truly committed to being her or his best self. You believe that, and you see evidence of it. The person is trying to do his or her best, is committed to that. A second is that a person is truly emotionally open, willing to try, maybe not perfectly, but willing to share as best as he or she can his or her feelings about things and attempting to make an emotional connection. Another thing is that the person has integrity, and not according to the person, but by other people who know him or her. See, a lot of times other people are good judges of those to whom we're attracted because they're not attractive, they look more objectively at things. So you want to look for integrity that is supported by the community of people or people who know this individual. Next is that the person has a history. And most of us, at this stage of the game, although I realize it's a very young group, most are on the upper edge of young adulthood, right? That's tact. Okay. That people in their history have a background of making responsible and good decisions. Everybody makes mistakes. We've all decided to do things that were less than wise. But you get an overall picture that the person seems to make responsible decisions that tend to move him or her into a better place in life. Also, that the person has a balanced sense of self-esteem. I really don't like the term very much, high esteem and low esteem. The trick is having a healthy esteem. One doesn't view oneself too positively, and yet one doesn't view oneself as awful and evil. A balanced sense of self. To use the old words of transactional analysis from the 70s, I'm okay and you're okay too. And I'm not okay and you're not okay, and that's fine. We have a balanced sense of one another. Also, that the person has an overall positive attitude about life in general. And I'll finally give you these 3 C's. If you take nothing out here tonight, take these 3 C's. Here are the 3 C's of good relationship. There's commitment, there's caring, and there's communication. If you're missing one of those 3 C's, you'll help me make my next mortgage payment. Okay, now let's take some questions now from you, and let's see what you think. Please.
Given everything in water, what is
Okay? You don't necessarily need to instantly break up with this person. You need, first of all, to bring an awareness of these kinds of situations to the relationship and see what happens. I'm sorry, that's the whole lecture. I just gave you the whole thing of what to look for and what to do in order to build a positive relationship. Just what I've said. Go ahead, it's dangerous. That's okay. All right. I'm thinking, did I do this clearly enough? That's fine. The main thing is that you're willing to work on it. The other person's willing to work and look at these kinds of things. And oftentimes you need a third party. It doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor or a social worker or something. A third party to help you fairly to work through it. I want to give you a promise that any two people that really are struggling with these issues and really intelligently working about them and doing their best are on the right track. Part of the trick of a relationship is just getting two people who want it to work and are willing to do it. Okay, what's another question? Please. I do recommend that you consult a professional, and often Christian counselors are a very good group. I mean, as in any profession, there are good and bad. There are a number of very good premarital inventories that are out there, and they're very good discussion starters. And you should take very seriously the predictors in those instruments of what doesn't work. And so what needs to happen is that prior to marriage is see how you're able to resolve those. And I might add that you give considerable time and energy to resolving them. Not where I just say, oh, yeah, listen, I know it's a problem, we'll work it out. But where you really grapple with it. I just can't explain that before you get married, the amount of thought and the amount of insight that you need. And anybody, any place that can assist is usually a very good idea. Because the odds are you are marrying somebody that is a different but similar psychodiagnostic or psychodynamic model of the last person you're with. We tend to marry the same kind of person. I wish I had more time to give you some specifics on that.
One of your predictors of successful relationships is the model of successful marriage.
That they've seen a successful marriage.
In this day and age, that's harder and harder to do. It doesn't say a good thing about where people are coming up. How are you going to, how's that going to, how can you make it, that's such a premise we're not going to see.
Well, let's look at marital statistics for one thing. 50% go down. Second marriages, 70% of those go down. 80% of third marriages go down. And after that, I recommend you have an attorney on retainer at all times. The marital statistics are awful. They're terrible. You need to be the exception of knowing what we're talking about so that you're not one of those statistics. And I think in being aware of the things to look for, consulting perhaps a professional or somebody to help you figure out exactly where you are, where this other person is, and especially how their connection is going to be together is paramount. Most people who get married have not done their homework and thought through the relationship. They've thought with parts of their body that they shouldn't. And
The second part of that question is how do you focus your children? If you're divorced and you're bringing them and you want them.
open up with them why the marriage didn't work, owning your part of it. That's very important, being vulnerable, owning your part of it. And then pointing with them, even in a theoretical way, what a good marriage is. Doing your best to look for one and trying to give them models. Look, son, I haven't had a very good marital history. It's not worked very well. So I don't want you to use me as a model. But what I'd like you and I to do is to try to figure out, like you and me to do, is to figure out what a good relationship is. What one is like. And that can really do a lot of bonding and openness with kids and is very, very helpful. I mean, if you sit there with your son and say, look, women are impossible. You know, if you want to get married someday, fine, but it's awful. You're not assisting much.